Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. Already having trouble. Okay, I worked hard to get everything all ship-shape today and trying to make sure that every voice was ready to go, but didn't make much of a difference. So it's hard to do when there was no one around here to talk to at this point. So now I have to turn on the microphone and speak to all of you, and I didn't get practice in warming things up. All right, well, anyway, it is March 14th. It's not the Ides of March. It's my last chance to warn you prior to the Ides of March to beware the Ides. I had been planning all along to say it on March 15th, but luckily it struck me earlier in the week. I really needed to give you a heads up if I meant it for you to beware them. I'm not an oracle, though, so I don't know for sure that there's anything special about that. You might as well beware today, which is a day unto itself. It is because it's March 14th when we abbreviate the date here in the United States the way we write it with the date first, and when we use the numbering system. March, the third month, 3. The 14th of the month coming next, 314, 3. It's real. I mean, we say slash. I usually use slashes, but some people use dots. And I guess if you used a decimal point, you would end up with 314. That's Pi Day, as many math geeks like to put it, or as a Jew who has it all likes to put it, from Medinat America, Yom Pi Sameach, to all my fellow geeks who are celebrating. And, well, I have nothing prepared for you on Pi Day, and I haven't even got any pie on hand either, and that's a fun way of celebrating it, but I'm still working my way through the Hamantashen as it is, so, let's be reasonable. Okay, good morning to everybody. Hey, and good morning to John Shiflett, who's back following us in the morning and letting everybody know when we are live on the air and what we're doing and who's on and whatnot. It is Tuesday, so it is not only Pi Day, but Joan McCarter Day. It's not every day that it is both. So, that's pretty cool. We got some catching up to do and find out what's been going on in terms of, what Congress has or hasn't been doing. The maniacs in the House haven't been able to accomplish much, but, there's a lot on their plate. And there are a lot of things they should be working out, but of course they have no plan to work these things out, including, raising the debt ceiling, crashing the economy if they don't. I guess we'll get some sense of what it means to crash the economy. Nothing reminds you of it like a couple of bank failures, I guess. But then if you're able to bail out a bank or two, you might just wonder why you can't bail out the whole damn thing when the economy crashes. And there's just not enough money to do that in the world, I guess. But you can always print more, I suppose. All right. Well, let's see. There are, of course, and John points out here, something I've seen in the last couple of days, a lot of attempts to blame the Silicon Valley Bank and or Signature Bank, sometimes both, with their own failures because, of course, they didn't have their eye on the banking ball, which they really kind of did. But, all right, mistakes were made, but they tried to pin it on an unnatural and unhealthy over-involvement in and curiosity and drive for diversity and inclusion. In other words, they had a diversity and inclusion program in their corporate structure at some point to do what? Well, the things that they normally do, make sure that they were populating their ranks to the extent possible and practicable with people of various backgrounds, because, of course, their clientele will be coming from various backgrounds. Okay, it's mostly rich white people, sure. But, the point is it makes sense to stay abreast of these things in the modern world, and no harm in trying it unless, of course, the anti-woke mob finds out that you might have done something to stay or keep your key personnel aware of diversity and inclusion issues that exist in the world and will therefore affect your business. So, it's an interesting thing that they're doing. Just, from the perspective of, well, let's see what the crazy idiots are up to now. But I am reminded that this is actually an old play and comes from their old playbook, and literally the same playbook. The 2008 banking crisis and financial crash, they also made every effort to blame it on the same favorite target, and saying that it was the Community Lending Act that had been responsible for these bank failures. And they all had to, play in the subprime mortgage market in order to comply with the Community Lending Act. And there's, one of those, that was back in the days where they tried to include some sort of grain of truth in there and then distort it into something bigger. And now they just don't even bother with the grain of truth anymore. They just say, well, the reason the bank failed was because it was woke. We don't have to explain anymore. Just say it. And the problem was the drag queen division in the bank, and they kept populating it entirely with drag queens and would lend only to drag queens. And if you wanted to have a loan approved, you had to show up in drag, and it was really a bad business practice, and yada yada, et cetera, et cetera. And you'd be able to tell people that was. You'd be able to make that fly at this point. The problem with Signature Bank wasn't the liquidity issues. It wasn't the crypto investments. It was the litter boxes that they were putting in the lobby for customers who identified as cats, fat cats. That was the problem. They were serving only fat cats, and people thought that they were really cats. And then they were so fat they didn't even fit in the litter boxes. They had to get even larger ones. That's probably exactly what happened. But I'm reminded of that story. We forgot that one. It fell off the radar, the cat box thing. Every time we have to listen to Ron DeSantis, or for that matter, Glenn Youngkin, or anybody else who's running for office as a Republican who thinks that they're going to coast to victory on attacking the education system, et cetera, and, woke this and parents' rights that, and got to get rid of the AP African American studies because some other reason, and yada yada. These people, a couple months ago, would have sworn to you on a stack of Bibles, and they very often are already just standing on stacks of Bibles no matter what's going on. So the Bibles are handy. But they would have sworn to you that there were absolutely, positively, definitely, because they heard from a cousin who's got, a friend who's got an internet access somewhere, and they don't, obviously, even except that they're telling you this over social media. I don't know. But they would have sworn to you that there were litter boxes in public school classrooms for kids who identify as cats or other animals, for that matter. My favorite one was the one who said, I swear to God, I heard about a kid who identifies as a snake, and they're using a litter box. And I was like, what snake is litter box trained? That's really crazy. I guess you should be happy that they're going in anything, any sort of contained unit whatsoever at that point. I don't know what you're supposed, where, has anybody, no one ever discusses what snakes. I assume does a snake crap in the woods? I guess so, because where else are they going to go? They can't open the bathrooms. They got no arms. So, they never flush. That's the problem with snakes. Anyway, the point is that most of the points that they're trying to make are stupid and easily debunked within seconds if you really, have your head screwed on straight and think about what you're doing. Speaking of the bank failure thing, they still have a lot of PR work to do to try to make this thing look a little bit better. And, I understand like I said yesterday, the ground truth of it is that there are going to be people involved who don't deserve to get crushed or not be able to pay their bills or their mortgages or whatever else, or run their small businesses, what have you. But like I said, the PR problem of having a bank fail in Silicon Valley, and it's called the Silicon Valley Bank, not so great. Plus, of course, to throw in a crypto-related crash from the opposite side of the country. It doesn't look good, and they still got a lot of work to do to make the case that it isn't just some sort of weird elitist bailout, because it still feels like one. And even if you try to make that case, maybe you want to pick and choose a little better about who's going to be the spokesperson. So this morning I saw being circulated via Twitter this thread from one Lindsay Michaelides, I guess, is maybe how you would pronounce her last name. And at any rate, I think she works. She identifies not as a snake, but as her unmarried. Her previous name, I think, she kept professionally on the site that she runs. But I'll just dive right into it. She comes and shows up on Twitter, identifying herself as the founder and CEO of StrongSuit.co. That's not StrongSuit.com, because that's a different company. StrongSuit.co, which, they have a little tagline, a little pitch here for you. Eradicating the mental load. Yeah, what? So we can all win at work and at home, is what she says. Dreamer, builder, adventurer, feminist, mom of four, and identifying herself, importantly enough, I think, as former McKinsey. So kind of I think that was the hint to everybody who then started, I guess, to be honest, what they're doing is sort of granite countertopping her in all of this. But this time, I don't know. I don't know whether she's a right-wing person or not, but at any rate, I suppose some people could think they were turning the tables on the granite countertop thing. But I guess at bottom, that's what it is. It's not really great, and I don't know how proud you should be of it. But at any rate, the point is, she goes on to say, "Hi, I'm Lindsay. A bit about me. I'm an Ohio mother of four. I employ a team of 15 as a startup founder and CEO of StrongSuit." This is an interesting one. This is sort of like, clearly, it's real probably, but also a bit of a pose here, right? I drive a used Honda Odyssey. I'm just an every person, right? I drive a used Honda Odyssey. And I ought to know, I drive a used Honda Odyssey. But I'm not the CEO of anything either. But okay, you get the point. Husband works in manufacturing. Not clear where, but how much detail can you offer in a bullet point? And the financial future of my company, team, and family are at risk with the collapse of SVB. Look at this. She tells that it's a 23 tweet thread. I don't know how far we're going to go into it, but you get the idea. She's trying to make the case that she's just a, middle class working mom of four from Ohio, not spending extravagantly, not getting venture capital loans from Silicon Valley Bank and then going and buying, Ducatis and Lamborghinis or anything like that. But a used Honda Odyssey. But I got to tell you, a used Honda Odyssey is not always a cheap car either. You buy last year's model off of somebody, lightly used, 20,000 miles on it or something. You can be spending 40, 50 if you reload it up with package stuff. $40,000 to get one, I would think, new. 10 years ago, I got a nice lightly used Odyssey, and I think it was 30-something. So, it's up there. Well, anyway, the collapse of SVB, she goes on to say, might look like a 1% problem that only impacts the coastal tech elite. Not true. I'm in Ohio, right? So she's totally not coastal. This impacts small businesses made up of hardworking people making modest mortgage payments in the Midwest. The Midwest! That's so important. This impacts parents putting dinner on the table. Although it is interesting, about how hectic her schedule must be, putting dinner on the table, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's busy. But later on, we find out a little bit about what StrongSuit actually does, and it's kind of about, making life easier sort of thing. And that's the mental load she was talking about. You got work, you got family, you got other obligations, maybe volunteer stuff on top of everything, or hobbies that, I don't know, somehow involve other people if you don't get it done right. I don't know. I have a stamp collection, and I didn't put the stamps in right, and now it's causing angst in the philatelist world. I don't know. Anyway, she goes on now. She's beginning with her story. So we get the whole background. My second child was born in 2017. My husband and I struggled as working parents to manage all the things. I sought advice from friends, mentors. I found no answers, only more stories of struggle. I started StrongSuit in 2018 with only an idea and lots of hustle. Build something that helps working families manage all the chaos. move parents from feeling frazzled and failing to feeling present and on top of it without settling and opting out of their careers. So it goes on. I mean, it's an interesting story. Lots of things happen. Like I said, it's 23 tweets. I don't know if you need to hear all of it, but the reason it caught my eye was one of the responses that was offered up. And I don't know how closely her story hews to the way I would tell the story if I knew the background. I can't really vouch for her. I can't say she's, making stuff up or embellishing or even spinning her story. I don't know. But I think probably the inclusion of the fact that she was formerly a McKinsey consultant does tip people off, right? Like, I started in 2018, had our second child. We were so frazzled. We're middle class, But, McKinsey consultants are kind of famous for, well, one, being highly educated white-collar professionals, and two, are famous for being hired by companies to come in and teach companies, instruct the management of companies how to dump all of these middle-class losers who are mooching off of your company and using their salary to do dumb stuff like put dinner on the table and make payments on used Honda Odysseys. They're losers. They're not doing anything for you. So it's kind of interesting. So this other person, Beth, Chuck's vacuum cleaner, I don't know what that means, but that's how they identify on Twitter, and I like to use people's pronouns, says, well, here's her version, I guess, of the real story. Former McKinsey, that starts right up at the top, who made $230K, gets $3 million in VC funds to start a business. Okay. I mean, you would expect that somebody like that might, in fact, be able to do $230,000 a year as a McKinsey consultant. Great money, even in Ohio, high-cost Ohio, and probably just enough to get that used Honda Odyssey into the driveway. Gets $3 million in VC funds to start a business. But what kind of business is it? Like, I love starting businesses. What's strong suit? We begin to learn a little bit about it here. Here's the business by, according to Beth, anyway, who may be a motivated commentator here. The business, you charge $6,000 a year to insanely rich people to help them plan vacations and birthday parties. And then the conclusion here, feel bad story debunked, right? All the struggles, and I just want to help people put dinner on the table. What is this strong suit thing anyway? So now there's some screenshots about this, and I guess they're taken from the Strong Suit website, which again, strongsuit.co, not .com. .com is something completely different. And the screenshot here says, you found the perfect plan. Now what? Join the wait list and you'll get paired with your strong suit soon. I'm not entirely clear how this whole thing works, so this doesn't make a great deal of sense to me, but included in the screenshot are the prices of strong suit membership. By the way, the top level there is Strong Suit Bespoke. And I don't really know why you would ever name it something like that. But anyway, $5,899 a year, or of course you can pay it off, $1,500 a quarter. You can do it that way, or $599 a month for Bespoke. Strong Suit Bespoke. What does that get you? I don't know. But here's some of the things that I guess are, I don't know where the screen grab comes from, but I guess some of the things that people might be using Strong Suit to help them organize so they can get dinner on the table. For instance, here's all you need to know to organize one of your 4 kids' tie-dye birthday parties. Ashley, our founder and COO, is queen of the themed kid birthday party. In fact, her biggest tip, and then it sort of trails off there. You got to click on the thing if you want to find out more about how she's the queen of the themed kid birthday party. Sometimes you want to have something like that. Our themes were usually, here's our used Honda Odyssey, Chuck E. Cheese, that's the birthday party. And, it was a big lump of money you had to put out to do that. No joke, but themed parties, Yeah, I mean, that might be a little bit above what we were willing to pay for our kids, but some kids are more social and you want to spend that way. Impossible fines is the next thing. I don't know what's going on here, but it says if you have young kids in a yard, you're doing pretty well for one thing. You may remember how last summer it seemed impossible to find, and we don't know what it is, but it looks like kids are playing on one of those in giant inflatable bouncy houses, or in this case, giant inflatable water slide. You may have found it impossible last summer to find an inflatable entertainment situation for your backyard. And golly, the struggles of the working class are in fact real. Then another screenshot of the Strong Suit working page here. And it looks like this is supposed to be an example, pardon me, of how the hardworking families in Ohio might use something like Strong Suit. There's a laptop open with screen displaying home organizing options. With the overview, and it's, you put in, apparently I did click on the site to see what it was about. You tell them about yourself and what you're working on, and they help you organize stuff, which, everybody wants to be organized. I don't know if you need to pay $6,000 a year to do it. I mean, get a notebook and then try the internet. We can figure out how to do these. So what sorts of things is the sample person here trying to organize? Well, it looks like the sample person, Catherine here, is looking for help finding spring break camp options for the kids. Also, virtual baby shower game ideas. New York City volunteer ideas. They're going to be making a family trip, I guess, to New York City, and they want to spend some time volunteering while they're there, and that's nice. Boston custom cake options, because something's happening in Boston, and there has to be a cake, and it has to be expensive. There's also microwave options, festive baby shower something or other, and 3 photo frame options. She's decorating the house. She's going to have a party with a cake in Boston. She wants to organize a virtual baby shower. The kids need spring break camps. They're going to New York City and they want to volunteer, and they got to buy a new microwave. That is a life, and it's a busy and hectic one. I mean, if you came to me and told me you wanted to spend $6,000 to organize that, I'd say sell the minivan. But I don't know. I mean, I guess there's got to be somebody for whom this hits the sweet spot. I guess my real question here is, if the bank fails and the small business people don't get their money, 15 people working at Strong Suit lose their job. That's not great. But I don't know, does the economy collapse? Here's 3 photo frame. I had 3 photo frame options all planned out. They researched on the internet and showed me pictures of frame options, and I was going to pick one. I think you can recover from that. There was a whole list of spring break camp options. Stay home. Go to the movies. Spring break. It's only a week. All right. You want to entertain the kids. He's got 4 of them. It's a big deal. They want to play soccer. They don't want to sit at home. I don't know. It just seemed like maybe not a $6,000 thing that you needed, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if, the whole thing never really came together. I don't know. I found that weird and somewhat interesting, just in terms of, well, maybe we take a second look at this whole thing and try and decide whether or not it's really all that worrisome. As Beth sort of sums it up here, we're like an inch away from learning that her job at McKinsey was to fire people, and it probably was, or club baby seals, or something like that. All the moms in Ohio have spent a decade making $250,000 a year and then got $3 million in VC funding. I'm not from Ohio, but I believe this is normal Ohio mom stuff, right? Okay, well, we can't be angry about her success. And it is, of course, important that people be able to maintain their jobs. And that's what's at bottom here. And the trickle-down effects, believe it or not, there are actually real. When it's economic pain, that trickles down pretty good. When it's the money that relieves the economic pain, that doesn't trickle so much. But the pain trickles pretty good. And to the extent that you can avoid it, I guess that would be the best thing you could do. But all right, we'll leave it to the financial services policy people to tell us whether or not this is the best approach to it or what might happen if we don't do it. All right, there's a couple of other things going on in the world you may have noticed, but that seemed like it's on everybody's mind. And, of course, we are coming up to our first break. We should have just stuck with it and ridden this all the way up to the break. I mean, maybe we go back and take a look at the rest of Lindsay's thread. I'm just curious what other things are plaguing Ohio moms these days that might ring alarm bells. Let's see. We left off about she had founded Strong Suit in 2018. My husband and I ran the numbers, even though I was an equal wage earner to him. Oh, that's interesting. Remember, she was making $230 or something like that. Was it just her making $230? That's crazy. He works in manufacturing. That could mean anything, of course. Like you're the boss of a bunch of people who actually work in manufacturing, and you too are making $230K. That's an awful lot of money. Well, anyway, let's see. Even though I was an equal wage earner to him, I could quit my job and write the first check, $10,000 check to start Strong Suit. We could cover 18 months of no income from me. It was a huge bet for us. It had to work. I hustled. Our insight was powerful. Strong Suit had paying customers immediately. I can't believe that. I hired a team. I still didn't pay myself. I found out I was pregnant again. Well, you know how that happened, right? Okay, just so you're sure. I got accepted to a top startup accelerator. Oh boy, I was 8 months pregnant. That is rough. With twins. Oh, when pitching my first investors. Well, that was energetic of you. I grew the business while navigating a high-risk pregnancy. I'd stopped to see my OB en route to the airport to get cleared to travel. Later, I pitched via Zoom well before it was acceptable. The hard work paid off. I secured our first investor shortly after my twins were born. Congratulations. And yeah, you're going to want to have access to that money even if the bank you put it in fails. I understand that. That's certainly something. On to Odyssey, huh? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. All right, I mean, I think we should probably be done with this, especially as I still, really don't know. I feel like I still don't know enough in order to really come down one way or the other exactly about how to deal with this SVB situation. Although I do note that as I'm reading through the rest of Lindsay's thread here, the common theme or the most repeated theme seems to be that she's not the tech elite and she doesn't know the tech elite. She's just a hardworking mom with kids, but I mean, everybody kind of is at some level. Although I did find this part interesting. Friday morning, I learned of SVB's precarious situation on Thursday. As a precaution, this is kind of interesting. As a precaution, I logged into my SVB account and wired all our funds to a small account I maintained at a different bank. I left only $250K to cover outstanding expenses, including payroll set to pay the team on Friday. So Friday morning, I learned that the wires had not processed. Then SVB collapsed and was taken over by the FDIC. I spent the day ensuring my team would be paid and talking with other founders in the same boat. The only certainty, all our money was locked up. Very little was insured. I don't know how this ends. I know, okay, and lots of, I'm worried about everything, which you should be. Although I wanted to stop and focus on that for a second. And it's like, well, you see, when you found out the precarious situation, or thought you found out about the precarious situation, or heard that somebody said that the situation was precarious, I mean, it's a little bit of a prisoner's dilemma here, right? Like, you did the only thing that was prudent, or that you could do, or you tried to anyway. It didn't work, but you wired or tried to wire all of your money out of the bank, which is to say, you heard rumors on the internet about solvency issues, and you joined in. You jumped in with both feet into the bank run and collapsed the place. I'm sure you're not the biggest depositor there by a long shot, but on Thursday, when you started, as you mentioned here in the rest of your thread, talking with other CEOs in the same boat, et cetera, other founders of small startups, and you all decided, quick, wire the money out of there. And the reason the wires didn't process was because by the time, the efficient markets theory tells us, but by the time, Peter Thiel's tip filtered down to you, because you don't know the tech elite. So it had to go through 2, 3, 4 people before it filters down to you, even if he spreads the news on social media. Although maybe you follow him, and you can find that out on Twitter, since she's on Twitter. But anyway, by the time that news got to you, by the time Peter Thiel told anybody that they should be getting out of Silicon Valley Bank, he was, of course, well out of it. Again, efficient markets theory tells us that by the time you get a hold of most information, unless you're generating it or talking directly to the person who is generating it, you're not getting it in time to actually, get out in time. It's too late. The bank has already pretty much collapsed. That's why the wires transfers didn't go. It wasn't because there was a computer glitch or somebody was lazy. It was because they were already locking things down and they weren't letting any money out anymore. The first movers got their money out, but you moved too late, which is to say only seconds too late, probably, in the real financial world. But by the time you realized that you needed to get out, the doom was already baked in. But nonetheless, that was your move, right? You definitely went ahead and tried to participate in the bank run. And I don't know how, sympathetic we're supposed to feel about that. But okay, anyway, you're just a mom. Speaking of technical glitches and big tech getting together to screw you up, I just wanted to note for the record that Joan has sent along the note, in case people are wondering. Yes, Daily Kos is having some sort of connectivity issues. I don't think I have any details on what those issues are, but it is happening. And I noticed that as well this morning. I just figured in 5 minutes it'll be over. But I guess it's still ongoing. If you were oh, no, it isn't. Now I can see that I connect. But her message is 5 minutes ago. So sometime in the last 5 minutes, everything appears to have been resolved. And so the future of SVB, too, as well. They fixed that while they were in there. That's good news. All right. I'm ready to shift away from that thing about which we know nothing, but just interesting that this is playing out this way, that there are people out there pleading their case. There are people out there granite countertopping the people who are pleading that case. I don't know where to come down on all of this, but it's above my pay grade anyway. But my best recommendation, read a bit of David Dayen, follow along. He knows what it means to not bail things out from this situation. And yet he seems to still kind of be advocating for some sort of tough love on these banks at some level. So, And he's also fairly informed in his commentary about these things, whereas all I can do is read his. So we'll shift gears, talk about a couple of other things that are going on, some things that might set us up for some nice conversation later on with Joan. For instance, apparently, just as Fox is taking blows left and right from the fallout of their lawsuit, or the lawsuit that Dominion Voting Systems has filed against them, it seems that there is another similar suit getting ready to do the same and more. And I don't think I was aware of this one, but it wasn't just Dominion Voting Systems that Fox News conspiracy theorists, opinion personalities, etc., were carrying on campaigns against. There are, of course, other electronic voting machine manufacturers that were accused alongside Dominion by Donald Trump and his Fedayeen minions, and therefore then by Fox News, also accused of helping steal the election, which didn't happen. But as it turns out, Fox News now bracing for more turbulence, according to the headline here in The Guardian, as a second defamation lawsuit advances. A New York court greenlights a suit against the news channel by the election company Smartmatic over the 2020 presidential election lies. And I skipped over the amount at controversy here just because I thought it was sort of funny. You all will remember by now if I ask you, class, how much is Dominion suing Fox for? And I think we all can now finally recite $1.6 billion. Well, if you were doing PR for Smartmatic and you were 12 years old, how much would you be suing Fox News for? And the answer, remember, you're 12 years old. You can probably do the math, but, why bother? This is a game of one-upmanship. I don't really know what's driving this, and I assume it's something real, and they have a mathematical basis for it. So you might think, well, $1.6 million, we'll sue for $1.7 million. No, not that option. Well, we'll sue for twice as much, $3.2 billion. No, it wasn't that approach either. I thought it was the funnier, maybe it's a 9-year-old thing, and it never would even occur to you to do the math. It's just one-upmanship on both levels. It's funny to me. It occurs to me because I'm mentally 9 years old. You're suing for $1.6 billion. Well, we'll sue for $2.7 billion. I'm gonna add one to both sides of the decimal point here. $2.7 billion suit. Wow. Well, why not? As Rupert Murdoch's Fox Corporation battles to contain the Dominion lawsuit scandal that engulfed its top executives and stars, another crisis is building in the wings that has the potential to cause further turbulence for the media empire. And we have to thank Ed Pilkington for this piece in The Guardian. Smartmatic's lawsuit against Fox News has attracted only a fraction of the attention garnered by the legal action of Dominion Voting Systems, and yet both firms are suing Fox for defamation related to its coverage of Donald Trump's stolen election lie, and both pose a serious threat to Fox's finances and reputation. In fact, on paper, Smartmatic's suit appears to be the more dangerous. It's demanding damages of $2.7 billion compared with Dominion's $1.6 billion. I'd love to know how they calculate all of this, but maybe there's something about that in here. But I wonder whether they've developed some evidence of some kind that either makes their case stronger, or whether they just think that they've suffered more damages, but they're just relying on all of the work that Dominion has done to turn up all the evidence that they need to cause all the turbulence that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. It seems to me that the larger award should go to the person who develops that evidence. But, if they have a financial basis for it, I'd love to see it. And, hell, I'll consider it. Why not? Let's give all Fox's money away. So far, attempts by Fox's lawyers to have the Smartmatic case dismissed have fallen on stony ground. Very English-seeming way of putting it. Last week, the New York State Supreme Court in Manhattan gave the green light for the case to proceed against Fox News. The Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo, the former business anchor Lou Dobbs, and Trump's former lawyer Rudy Giuliani, I guess all named personally in the suit, which is interesting. And a reminder, the New York State Supreme Court in Manhattan is not the state Supreme Court. It's actually the lowest level trial courts. In there, they, their naming nomenclature is strange and unusual, but that's what it is. So it's not happening in the Supreme Court, as we sometimes understand it, outside of New York. Smartmatic, a global election technology company headquartered in London, lodged its defamation suit in February of 2021. The earth is round was the complaint's striking opening sentence. 2 + 2 = 4. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won the 2020 election. It's pretty straightforward. The complaint goes on to argue that contrary to those indisputable facts, Fox News broadcast a series of blatant lies in support of Trump's stolen election conspiracy theory. Defendants did not want Biden to win the election. They wanted President Trump to win re-election. They also saw an opportunity to capitalize on President Trump's popularity by inventing a story. To prop up that story, the lawsuit claims Fox needed a villain, and that villain was Smartmatic, and also Dominion. Smartmatic claims that more than 100 false statements were broadcast by Fox News hosts and guests. Smartmatic was falsely said to have been involved in the 2020 election counts in 6 battleground states. In fact, it was present only at the count in Los Angeles County. Interesting also. Fox broadcast that Smartmatic shared its technology with Dominion, when in fact the two companies had no communication and regarded each other as rivals. Smartmatic was in cahoots with foreign governments in a conspiracy to rig the vote for Biden, Giuliani said on Bartiromo's show, a claim that the company disputes as false and defamatory. Fox also described Smartmatic as, came out almost put together Fox and Smartmatic, and you get Fartmatic. So beware of that, Ides of March or otherwise. Described Smartmatic as having been founded in Venezuela at the behest of corrupt dictators. I thought that was Dominion, but I guess it's both, or all of them. In fact, it was founded by Antonio Mujica, maybe, and Roger Piñate in 2000. But where? Not Venezuela, Boca Raton, Florida. In the wake of the hanging Chad fiasco, with the aim of using technology to restore people's faith in election results. Oh well. The business has since grown around the world. The firm claims that it has lost clients as a result of what it calls Fox's disinformation campaign. Fox News has disputed Smartmatic's multi-billion-dollar estimate of its losses, calling it vastly inflated. A spokesperson for the broadcaster told The Guardian, "Freedom of the press is foundational to our democracy and must be protected. In addition to the damages claims being outrageous, unsupported, and not rooted in sound financial analysis, serving as nothing more than a flagrant attempt to deter our journalists from doing their jobs. There's nothing more newsworthy than covering the president of the U.S. and his lawyers making allegations, even if they're lies." Smartmatic has a very high bar to meet if it is to win the defamation suit at trial. New York state law has a rigorous approach to the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which preserves press freedom. They have to remind you of this in The Guardian. Under it, plaintiffs have to be able to convince a jury not only did the media outlet put out false information, it did so with actual malice. That means that it either knew it was peddling a lie and went ahead anyway, or showed a reckless disregard for the truth. But it's certainly beginning to look like they can actually make a run at that, right? New York is pretty protective of media rights, Roy Gutterman said, a media law professor at Syracuse University, who was a consultant early on in the Smartmatic case, advising a non-party entity. "Every year I read a lot of cases from New York, and it's hard to be successful in this state. Despite the tough challenge so far, the wind is in Smartmatic's sails." David Cohen, a New York Supreme Court justice presiding over the litigation, has indicated that the company has a strong enough case to go to trial. In last week's ruling, Cohen found that at minimum, Fox News turned a blind eye to a litany of outrageous claims about Smartmatic. Plaintiffs have pleaded facts sufficient to allow a jury to infer that Fox News acted with actual malice. So that's the stage they're at. Basically, it was, I would assume, although it's not mentioned here, it sounds like that's our good friend, the motion for summary judgment, that Fox might have perhaps moved for summary judgment or moved for a dismissal of the case based on the premise that even if you assume what Smartmatic is saying is true about it having been defamed in some way, even if not legally, because of the actual malice standard. There's no way that you can prove it. Plus, of course, we're protected from the First Amendment. Plus, your claim for damages is inflated and wrong. Plus, we didn't even do it. But as it turns out, Judge Cohen disagrees and says, well, they make a pretty good case here that they might really be able to reach the actual malice standard based on nothing, even if based on nothing but the revelations from the Dominion lawsuit, although they don't mention that here in the article as being the reason. So the case goes forward. It doesn't mean they win. It just means they're allowed to make the case. And, well, that's step one, and Dominion is beginning on it and making a lot of news doing it. All right, let's see. What else have we got here that I thought I want to catch up on other stories, but I'll have to find some time later in the week to see if we can finish up the story about Pras Michel and Jolo and the others wrapped up in this one MDB thing. But we got to set aside another full hour to do it at some point, and maybe even more. All right, let's see. Here's another story I had set aside here. Let's see. How about which direction do we go here? Why not this one? Just by way of, well, let's see. What time are we looking at here? I guess so. We can do a little bit before the break and a little bit after. But because Joan's coming around, and as we all know, Joan used to live in Idaho and now has moved on, but we always used to speak extensively about the various cuckoo birds who hung out in Idaho and made life difficult. And there was an interesting story over the weekend in the New York Times about what they, I thought very aptly, named the MAGAfication of North Idaho College, an education issue type focus here. And again, maybe it might have been part of what reminded me that, again, the people behind this thing very likely, although this has nothing to do with it, very likely probably spent the last 6 months swearing that there were litter boxes in elementary school classrooms. But what happens when they take over a college? And maybe this is an early preview of what to expect from Chris Rufo and Ron DeSantis in Florida and the new college down there, and what they're trying to do with what they've got. Again, the MAGAfication of North Idaho College. GOP activists, I say GOP because they included the periods in this one and actually indicate that it's a abbreviation, but the GOP. The GOP activists set out to root out the deep state at home. And Idaho Community College may never be the same, I guess, as a result. Charles Homans, Homans, hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, is responsible for the piece, again, in the New York Times. Dateline here is Coeur d'Alene. The February meeting of the North Idaho College Board of Trustees was, by recent standards, civilized. There were no shoving matches, for instance, or speeches from far-right podcasters. Nobody pulled the fire alarm, not this time anyway. The parade of community members who, under the wary eye of campus security officers, took turns at the microphones, mostly kept their voices below shouting volume, "I like me!" Until an hour or so, of course, before midnight, when a woman cried, "Shame on you!" and stormed out of the room. Mostly, people seemed stunned that it had actually come to this. For most of the past 2 years, the college's governing board has been a volatile experiment in turning grievances into governance. What do you know? Trustees, backed by the county Republican Party, hold a majority on the board. They have denounced liberal, quote, indoctrination by the college faculty and vowed to bring the school's administration deep state to heal and make NIC great again. Oh no. The injection of such sweeping political aims into the routine administration of a community college that had 4,600 students enrolled last year, one better known locally for its technical training programs than the politics of its faculty, has developed into a full-blown crisis. The school has faced lawsuits from 2 of the 5 presidents that it's had since the start of the previous school year. 5 presidents. Wow. Not just 5 presidents that they've had, but 2 of the 5 are still suing the school. Just in the past school year. A district court judge ordered one of those presidents reinstated on Friday in a ruling that castigated the trustees for, quote, steering NIC toward an iceberg, unquote. The college has lost professors and staff and had its debt downgraded by Moody's, which cited the school's, quote, significant governance and management dysfunction, unquote. This is basically going to be then a story of what happens when you take right-wing lunatic conspiracy theorists and elect them to positions of responsibility. They infect everything that they do with their craziness, and everything begins to fall apart, as normal business can't be done because lunatics are running things. Back to the story. The troubles culminated last month in a letter from the Regional Higher Education Commission, which warned that the 90-year-old college could be stripped of its accreditation if changes were not made in a matter of weeks, an effective threat of closure and a potential catastrophe for Coeur d'Alene, a town of 56,000 in the Idaho Panhandle. The college is the 6th largest employer in Kootenai County and a source of skilled labor for much of the local economy. As a business person here, it's heartbreaking to me to be standing on the brink of the loss of this institution, said Eve Knudsen. It's Knudtsen. I'll have to check all the pronunciations here with Joan at some point. She may even know the family names as well. Anyway, she's the owner of a Chevrolet dealership in the neighboring town of Post Falls. Ms. Knudsen, a Republican, attended NIC, as have both of her daughters, and she said a third of the technicians hired by her dealership come out of the school. It's pretty much a dystopian farce, said Kathleen Miller Green, an assistant professor of child development, who attended the nearly 6-hour capacity crowd meeting at the school's student union building on February 22nd. It's laughable if you don't have to live it. Rick McLennan, a former president of the college, who was ousted by the trustees in 2021, describes the school as a canary in the coal mine, a warning of what awaits local institutions across the country as fiercely partisan and disruptive cultural battles spread into new corners of public life. He and other critics of the trustees see parallels with Governor Ron DeSantis' efforts to remake New College, a state-run liberal arts school in Sarasota, Florida, as a conservative bastion. What's different about Northern Idaho College, however, is that local voters have more directly driven the change, and the results have been less ideological overhaul than organizational chaos. In Kootenai County, a magnet for conservative retirees from other states, where Donald Trump won 70% of the vote in 2020, most public institutions and services are overseen by directly elected trustees. That means that Republican activists and voters who increasingly see even once benign institutional authorities as a threat to their values are in a position to do something about it. Oh no. The clash over the college began in 2020, when, after the killing of George Floyd by police in Minneapolis, the school's Diversity Council issued a statement expressing support for social justice demonstrations, including Black Lives Matter protests. The statement caught the attention of the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee. And you always got to watch out for when you catch the attention of a party's central committee, like in China or the Soviet Union. That year, the committee began vetting and endorsing candidates for county board positions in what are technically nonpartisan elections. In the Coeur d'Alene Press, a committee precinct woman accused the school of supporting a, quote, radical racist and Marxist organization and guilting white male students, and urged county residents to vote for two candidates endorsed by the committee, quote, to balance the NIC board in the November election. Brent Regan, the committee's chairman, argues the endorsements are no different from those of the local Rotary Club or newspaper. The mission of the Republican Party in Kootenai County is to try to find people who will run for office, any office, from sewer districts to school boards to trustee boards, who embrace the policies of the Republican Party as outlined in our platform, Mr. Regan said. I'm going with Regan, the Don Regan pronunciation of R-E-G-A-N, even though I know that there are people out there who do pronounce it Reagan, and we were all served up as 80s kids. The difference between the A's in being there and not being there was that one was Reagan and one was Regan, but sometimes they do call themselves Reagan these days. In the matter of the college's imperiled accreditation, he said, we're a convenient scapegoat. The committee's college trustee candidates both won. They formed an informal majority on the 5-member board with a like-minded incumbent trustee, Todd Banducci, who had clashed on occasion with other trustees and the school's administrators and staff. In an email to a conservative student, Mr. Banducci wrote that he was, quote, battling the NIC deep state on an almost daily basis, and complained that, quote, the liberal progressives are quite deeply entrenched. I'm sure the liberal progressives were deeply, deeply entrenched in northern Idaho. Mr. Banducci and other trustees declined to comment, with Mr. Banducci citing the board's involvement in litigation. In a conversation after the election, Mr. Banducci chided Mr. McLennan, then the college's president, for his wife's support of Hillary Clinton, and told him that he would give him marching orders, according to McLennan. Oh no, his wife supported Hillary Clinton. We have to fire the president of the college. My perspective was, you can't do that, Mr. McLennan recalled. It's not going to work like that. In January, he wrote a letter to the trustees expressing his concern over what he described as a pattern of behavior by Mr. Banducci, who had been privately censured by the board the year before, following a report that a college staff member had felt threatened and intimidated by him. Mr. Banducci did not respond to a request for comment regarding the incident. In March, local human rights organizations filed a complaint with the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, the accreditation body, arguing that Mr. Banducci's conduct had severely violated several criteria for accreditation. They were in the process of dismantling the institution, said Tony Stewart, the secretary of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations, which drafted the complaint. Mr. Regan argued that Mr. Stewart's organization, which formed in the 1980s to combat white supremacists who were active in Kootenai County, had strayed far from its mission. Were there human rights violations going on? No. Back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Finally got the button working here. Shall we jump back in then to the magnification of the Northern Idaho College story? I think we will, but I wanted to stop for a second and see, just point out what Mr. Regan here is doing. He's angry that the, what did they call themselves? The Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations, which formed in the 1980s to combat white supremacists who were then active, and I guess still are active, in Kootenai County. Well, you've strayed from your mission. There aren't any human rights violations going on. So he called the accreditation review a political process started by people who didn't like the results of the election. But actually, I'm just looking back on it. This is the Task Force on Human Relations. Are there and then he says, well, are there human rights violations going on? No. So you've strayed from your mission. So what are you doing? You're obviously political. Well, what are you talking about? Human rights violations? It's the Task Force on Human Relations. Are there human relations going on? Yes, there are. Maybe they started out as a human rights task force. I don't know. Maybe they changed their name, whatever. But by the way, speaking of straying from your mission, like, I'm sure that doesn't bother him if, Moms for Liberty show up and they say, we just don't like these mask mandates. And then they're also anti-vax, but they're not just anti-vax on COVID. They're anti every kind of vax. And P.S., we're also mad about critical race theory and litter boxes and drag queens and whatever else comes next. You were here about the mask mandate the other day. Now you're like CRT, drag queen, something, and no complaints from Mr. Reagan about straying from their original mission, by the way, I'm sure. Anyway, Mr. Banducci's block of trustees eventually fired Mr. McLennan without cause. That was the school president, remember, installing the schools. And this is like, this feels like Matrix glitch, just in terms of the Republicans have fired the school president. They replace him. They need another interim president. They replace him with the school's wrestling coach, which, for one thing, it's like, well, that's out of the blue. I guess maybe he's a very famous coach or whatever. But again, just the fact that once again, Republicans in trouble, reaching for somebody to replace somebody who's, they're trying to oust. And it's always the wrestling coach. It's weird. Denny Hastert, Jim Jordan, this guy. Like, there's other sports. You could get the coach from other sports and that would work. Tommy Tuberville or whatever. He coached that other sport that people love to, play and give themselves concussions with. Football. You could have gone with a football coach. Maybe they didn't have a football team. Anyway, a power struggle ensued, with the state education board at one point appointing several interim trustees who hired a new president. In the November 2022 election, candidates backed by the GOP committee once again claimed the majority and replaced him, too. The turnover has been cited by the accreditation body, along with several votes of no confidence in the trustees from the college faculty and student government, as a source of its concern. Sunny, we'll have to work on this pronunciation. Sunny Ramaswamy, I guess that's what I'm going to go with. Sunny Ramaswamy, the commission president, declined to discuss the accreditation review, citing discussions with the school. In November, Greg McKenzie, the current board chair, dismissed the prospect of losing accreditation as fake news in a letter to constituents, if you're wondering where his head is at. But at the February meeting, as that loss suddenly seemed like a very real possibility, the trustees appeared somewhat chastened. Mr. McKenzie reminded the crowd that members of the accrediting commission were watching via live stream and asked attendees to help avoid the circus-like atmosphere of recent meetings. In January, Vincent James Fox, a far-right anti-Semitic podcaster who lives in Kootenai County, took the microphone to offer the block of trustees his 100% support. A December meeting was interrupted twice by fire alarms. The threat of losing accreditation, which would leave the school ineligible for federal financial aid and students' future credits worthless if they transfer, has drawn local business leaders off the sidelines. Good, about time, right? At the meeting, Greg Green, a telecom entrepreneur and philanthropist, vowed to fund challenges to the committee-backed block of trustees in the next election. Hooray! In particular, Mr. Banducci. I had no clue how bad things were, Mr. Green said. And Mr. Green, by the way, is a Republican. But the bloc has withstood one such challenge already. In November, the local Chamber of Commerce and a new political action committee called Friends of NIC endorsed a slate of rival candidates for 3 open trustee seats. But a Republican committee-backed candidate won one of the 3 races, enough to recapture a majority. In interviews, students said the imminent threat of losing accreditation had caught the attention of a student body that had mostly tuned out the years of confusing power struggles. It's really sad, said Madeline Morgan, a second-year English and chemistry double major from California. Ms. Morgan said she had come to Idaho from California hoping for more political diversity. Really? It's interesting. I guess she's maybe a conservative and felt like in college in California there wouldn't be enough ideological diversity, so she needed to go someplace where there were enough conservatives that she could actually hear a conservative viewpoint once in a while. And she got it in spades, I guess, and it's not really working out. She goes on to say, it's not like I really disagreed with the ideas down there, she said, I guess California. It's just that I wanted a place where, conservative or liberal, you could speak your mind. Still, she found herself siding with the faculty. They have families to feed and bills to pay, she said. They're not the problem here. The trustees are. But Jaron Brown, a second-year student in the school's diesel technology program from the nearby town of Hayden, said that the school's technical students were less engaged than its liberal arts students. They're a lot more political. And you could probably guess that might even be the case. We've actually made it to the end of the article, so we don't get to find out what happens. They're still fighting this out. But I thought that was interesting, and it was good for them. Great to see the author here, again, Charles Homans, call out the direct comparison to what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. We'll see if that's a story that's at all on Joan's radar, or she happens to know anything about it, just sort of as a side pursuit. There's plenty more that she's been covering in the last couple of days. And let's see, I've got 1 or 2 of her pieces at the ready here, but I don't know whether, sometimes I don't know whether to read some of these stories so that she's free to do other ones, or whether I should let her tell the stories. I think we'll just do it that way, and let her have free reign over the discussion when we have her join us in the next segment. In the meantime, let's see a couple of other stories that have been parked and ready to roll in the last couple of days. I just kind of have to make some decisions about which ones to do. Let's try some, do a little bit of international news here, if we can, in the next segment or two. Well, let's see. We have, the story that Greg forwarded a couple of days ago, although we might want to save that one for him to get it. Well, maybe we'll do an international section here. But just a touch of international news, just to remind you that these things are still going on. Despite what's happening in Ukraine, I don't think that the Russians have been chastened at all in some of their soft power pursuits. If anything, I guess you could argue that their struggles in Ukraine might reinforce for them the better return on investment that they get in influence campaigns and soft power projection, rather than, and I guess I would include in soft power propaganda operations versus actual, shooting war invasions. That's not working out so great for them. This story in CNN's politics section, although could be, it's international politics anyway. Russia-linked individuals, whatever that means, because you can't tell anymore. Linked with, it's pretty clear that they're linked with Russia, but are they linked with the government? We don't know. What is the government? Where does it start? Where does it end? Russia-linked individuals working to trigger insurrection against Moldovan government, the U.S. believes. This according to Natasha Bertrand, a familiar name from over at CNN. The U.S. intelligence community believes that individuals with ties to Russian intelligence are planning to stage protests in Moldova to try to foment a manufactured insurrection against the Moldovan government with the ultimate goal of seeing a more pro-Russia administration installed there, White House officials said on Friday. And after all, couldn't you have described January 6th in similar terms? After all, they were interested in fomenting an insurrection, I'm sure, so long as the ultimate goal was the installation of a more pro-Russia administration, which they would have gotten from a Donald Trump administration, I'm sure. The U.S. believes that Russia is working to weaken the Moldovan government, which is seeking closer ties with the European Union and National Security Coordinator, this according to National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby. The U.S. is also seeing signs that Russian government-linked actors could provide training to anti-government demonstrators in Moldova. The country's capital, Chisinau, has been rocked by anti-government protests in recent weeks, largely organized by Moldova's Russia-friendly Shor Party, S-H-O-R, Shor. Okay, interesting, and I believe we've actually mentioned Chisinau on the program before. Whether we got the pronunciation right or not, we'll never know. The Biden administration also believes that Moscow is working to sow disinformation about Moldova's overall stability. It's the Silicon Valley Bank of Europe, I guess. One example was the Russian Ministry of Defense's claim last month that Ukraine has been planning to invade Transnistria, Moldova's Moscow-backed separatist region. Interesting. U.S. officials said those allegations are unfounded, false, and create baseless alarm. They might be a little bit busy already over there in Ukraine. Moldova's president, Maya Sandu, said publicly last month that she believes the Russian government was planning a series of actions, including saboteurs who have undergone military training and are disguised as civilians to carry out violent actions, attacks on government buildings, and hostage-taking. The Biden administration sees no immediate military threat to Moldova, officials said, but the U.S. has been watching Russia's activities in Moldova closely, wary of Russia's ongoing efforts to destabilize Europe. President Joe Biden met with Sandu last month in Warsaw, where they discussed Russian malign influence activities. And of course, back in June of 2016, the Republican leadership in the House was discussing Russia's malign influence activities across Europe and in emerging democracies everywhere, and even in established democracies here in the United States, and then just totally missed the point. And Kevin McCarthy once again missed the point, and never missing an opportunity to misunderstand Ukraine, blurted out that blah, 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 Putin pays Trump, ha, 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 I'm only joking, in the middle of a fairly serious conversation about Russia's campaign in Ukraine. And the Republicans, I guess that was the last time they were on the brink of really getting what was going on, and McCarthy steered them away from it pretty effectively. All right. Where were we here? Yes, the U.S. is declassifying this intelligence now in an effort to deter Russia from moving forward with its plans, the officials said, similar to how the U.S. has been regularly declassifying intelligence about Russia's intentions in Ukraine with the aim of exposing their plans. The administration sanctioned 9 individuals and 12 entities in October that the U.S. believed to be involved in working to destabilize Moldova, including oligarchs widely recognized for capturing and corrupting Moldova's political and economic institutions, and those acting as instruments of Russia's global influence campaign, the U.S. Treasury Department said in a statement at the time. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Sandu at the Munich Security Conference in mid-February and voiced deep concern about efforts by Russia to destabilize the Moldovan government. We stand strongly with Moldova in support of its security, its independence, its territorial integrity, the very important reform efforts that the president and government are making, Blinken said. At the same time, we have deep concern about some of the plotting that we've seen coming from Russia to try to destabilize the government, but appreciate, of course, the good efforts being made by Moldova to protect against that. So just sort of putting that on your radar, Might be someplace, another flashpoint in the next couple of weeks, perhaps, that we might have to concentrate on. Let's see. Other things to discuss here we really have to get to, or at least make mention of. For one thing, the passing of former Representative Pat Schroeder of Colorado. I just have a short Associated Press piece on that rather than try and sum it up from memory. I thought I'd get someone else's more organized thoughts just to make sure I didn't miss too much about Pat Schroeder, but that might be something we want to talk about a little bit in the next segment as well. The AP reporter Douglas Daniel put this brief piece together just to break the news. Former U.S. Representative Pat Schroeder, a pioneer for women's and family rights in Congress, has died. She was 82. Schroeder's former press secretary, Andrea Camp, said Schroeder suffered a stroke recently and died Monday night at a hospital in Celebration, Florida, the city where she had been residing in recent years. Schroeder took on the powerful elite with her rapier wit and antics for 24 years, shaking up stodgy government institutions by forcing them to acknowledge that women had a role in government. Remember when you had to do that? Her unorthodox methods cost her important committee posts, but Schroeder said she wasn't willing to join what she called the good old boys club just to score political points. Unafraid of embarrassing her congressional colleagues in public, she became an icon for the feminist movement. Schroeder was elected to Congress in Colorado in 1972 and became one of the most influential Democrats as she won easy re-election 11 times from her safe district in Denver. Despite her seniority, she was never appointed to head a committee. Interesting. Schroeder helped forge several Democratic majorities before deciding in 1997 that it was time to leave. Her parting shot in 1998 was a book titled 24 Years of Housework, and The Place is Still a Mess, My Life in Politics, which chronicled her frustration with male domination of the slow pace of change in federal institutions. In 1987, Schroeder tested the waters for the presidency, mounting a fundraising drive after fellow Coloradan Gary Hart pulled out of the race. She announced 3 months later that she would not run and said her tears signify compassion, not weakness. Her heart was not in it, she said, and she thought fundraising was demeaning, and she was right. She was the first woman on the House Armed Services Committee, but was forced to share a chair with U.S. Representative Ron Dellums, the first African-American, when committee chairman F. Edward Hebert, there's the Hebert, because he's from Louisiana, organized the panel. Interesting. I don't think I remember Hebert very much at all, but and I don't remember this situation, but it doesn't surprise me at all that that would have happened. Schroeder said Hebert thought the committee was no place for a woman, or an African American for that matter, and they were each worth only half a seat. Holy moly. Republicans were livid after Schroeder and others filed an ethics complaint over House Speaker Newt Gingrich's televised college lecture series, charging that free cable time he had received amounted to an illegal gift under House rules. Gingrich became the first speaker reprimanded by Congress. Gingrich said later he regretted not taking Schroeder and her colleagues more seriously. Earlier, she had blasted Gingrich for suggesting women shouldn't serve in combat because they could get infections from being in a ditch for 30 days. Of course, anybody can. But anyway, according to her official House biography, she once told Pentagon officials that if they were women, they would always be pregnant because they never said no. Asked by one congressman how she could be a mother of 2 small children and a member of Congress at the same time, whoa, she replied, "I have a brain and a uterus, and I use both." That's the factual answer. It was Schroeder who branded President Ronald Reagan the Teflon president for his ability to avoid blame for major policy decisions, and the name stuck. One of Schroeder's biggest victories was the signing of the Family Leave Bill in 1993, providing job protection for care of a newborn, a sick child, or a parent. Pat Schroeder blazed the trail. Every woman in this House is walking in her footsteps, said Representative Nita Lowey of New York, who took over from Schroeder as Democratic chair of the bipartisan Congressional Caucus on Women's Issues. Schroeder said legislators spent too much attention on contributors and special interests when House Republicans gathered on the U.S. Capitol steps to celebrate their first 100 days in power in 1994. She and several aides clambered to the building's dome and hung a 15-foot red banner reading, "Sold." That's pretty cool. A pilot, Schroeder earned her way through Harvard Law School with her own flying service. That is a way to get through Harvard Law School, man. Wow. Schroeder became a professor at Princeton University after leaving Congress, but said politics was in her blood and she would continue working for candidates that she supported. For a while, she taught a graduate-level course titled The Politics of Poverty. She also headed the Association of American Publishers. Schroeder continued working in politics after moving to Florida, going door to door, speaking to groups and mentoring candidates. She was politically active for issues and candidates across the country and campaigned for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Among other activities, she served on the board of the Marguerite Casey Foundation. Schroeder was born in Portland, Oregon on July 30th, 1940, graduated from the University of Minnesota before earning her law degree in 1964. From 64 to 66, she was a field attorney for the National Labor Relations Board. She is survived by her husband, James W. Schroeder, whom she married in 1962. Also surviving are their two children, Scott and Jamie, and her brother, Mike Scott, as well as 4 grandchildren. So your traditional obituary type line at the end there, but a great recap, very brief, but very powerful recap of Pat Schroeder's highlight reel, I guess, in Congress over, what did they say, 24 years? Frankly, pretty amazing to not have a chairmanship at that point. But, of course, it would have been a chairwomanship for one thing, and it just goes to illustrate, I guess, really just how recent the development of, the place of women as relative equals, it's still only relative equals, I'd say, in government, really is. I mean, this is modern era stuff that they were saying, wow, a woman and an African American, they can't chair the Armed Services Committee. I say, we got to have them share it. I mean, that's crazy. I don't know why that didn't register with me. I was alive. Why didn't I see that at the time? Well, anyway. All right. Much more to come, of course, and heading towards the end of our third segment. But I got to get to one more thing that has been, getting play in the news. But I must say it's a nice atmosphere, and it's the fact that this hasn't been the one and only screamer headline all day long since the former guy said it is a credit to our, I don't know what, a credit to somebody for something, that maybe we're finally one day eventually going to finally, be done with this guy and move past him. But he keeps injecting himself into the narrative. So we will acknowledge that this happened. The Washington Post headline I'm referring to, of course, is Trump claims violence he inspired on January 6th was Pence's fault. Sure, why not? The former president suggested that the riot could have been avoided if his vice president had cooperated in overturning the results. That's logic for you. Isaac Arnsdorf and Maeve Reston team up for this piece, and let's see if we can't race through it before our next break. Where'd he do it? Davenport, Iowa. Why'd he do it? 'Cause he's dumb. Donald Trump on Monday sharply rebuked Mike Pence's assertion that history would hold him accountable. I think I might agree with him there. History probably won't. For the January 6th, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, telling reporters that his former vice president should shoulder the blame for the violent riot that day by Trump supporters. The quote is, had he sent the votes back to the legislatures, they wouldn't have had a problem with January 6th. So in many ways, you can blame him for January 6th, the former president said, referring to Pence's refusal to reject the Electoral College votes in Congress as Trump wanted him to do that day. Had he sent them back to Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, the states, I believe, number one, you would have had a different outcome. But I also believe you wouldn't have had January 6th, as we call it. Okay. I mean, Basically, well, I believe that if everybody had simply surrendered to Trump and made me dictator for life, you wouldn't have had these problems. That's true. You would have had other problems, worse. But, no, this will not fly. But, it's not meant to fly with the rest of the country. It's just supposed to work with MAGA, I guess. I mean, as long as we're speculating, I don't know, had they Ceausescu'd the guy in the Rayburn Horseshoe on January 7th, how many other problems could have been avoided? I don't know. Well, guess we'll never know. A pro-Trump mob, as you may know, attacked the Capitol on January 6th following months of false claims by Trump that the election was stolen from him. He also used incendiary and false rhetoric about the election at a rally on the Ellipse near the White House shortly before the rioters stormed the Capitol. Thank you for recapping that. Trump was responding to Pence's remarks on Saturday where he said unequivocally that Trump had been, quote, wrong to demand that he overturn the election, something Pence maintained he had no power to do, and he didn't. His reckless words endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol that day, Pence said during a speech at the White Tie Gridiron Dinner in Washington, and I know that history will hold Donald Trump accountable. The former president made his comments to reporters aboard his plane as he made his way to Iowa for his first visit since announcing his presidential bid last year. Okay, so it wasn't at the rally, but maybe he probably repeated something like it at the rally. The trip came as Trump was also under intense legal scrutiny, facing several investigations, as you know. Trump suggested that Pence's condemnation was driven by his single-digit showings in a recent survey of potential 2024 presidential election contenders. Pence has not officially announced his candidacy, even as he has made moves toward entering the race. I guess he figured that being nice wasn't working, Trump said. But, he's out there campaigning, and he's trying very hard, and he's a nice man. I've known him. I've had a good relationship until the end. Except they really didn't, and he tried to get him murdered. But okay. Other than that, let's see. I don't know. There's more, of course, to the piece, but I don't know how much value we derive from trying to read through it. And of course, we're out of time to do so anyway. I just wanted to sort of get that comment on the record, just so that we know it's out there. Calm response to it so far. It hasn't been a total freak out. I guess it's, I don't know whether, I hate to chalk that up to progress, though. We'll be right back. Hello, Joan. How you doing?
Hello, Kagro. I am fine. How are you? I should call you David.
Yeah. You can do anything. You do it that way all the time. That's fine. All right.
I just too many years.
Yeah. Right. Well, are you? Why aren't you fixing Daily Cows or something? I understand there's an issue. We're back. It was up for a second when you sent that message, and I checked it. And I'm like, oh, look, it works. You fixed it.
I did not fix it. No.
It's back down again. All right. Okay. We'll live with it. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. As we were exiting, although I think maybe the break cut it off, I was saying, talking about Donald Trump and his latest weird comments blaming Mike Pence for the insurrection and saying, but I was saying, I think I blurted out something like, I hate to chalk that up to progress. I mean, I meant I hate to chalk that up as progress. The fact that we're finally, I was glad that there wasn't the usual level of media freak out and frenzy and focus on the latest stupid comment. I was hoping that it does mark some kind of progress, but it's just so minor that it's like, it's not much progress, that we're finally getting around to treating Donald Trump a little bit like we should have been treating him all along. But anyway, it was a ridiculous comment, regardless, and designed to inflame. And that's all I have to say about that. Is basically what I'm going to say. Joan McCarter is here, despite the fact that Daily Kos is not. I guess it is still back. It's back down. I checked again.
It's coming and going, and some people are able to open some things, and some of us can't, and so it's a little shaky right now. Let's just say that. So
they'll be working on patching it up and making sure it can get back up and running good. I need it right now. All of a sudden, so what's happening? I need it. Where is it? I was gonna, click through to some of the latest posts that you've put up so that I had them ready for discussion, but you probably remember what you wrote about.
Mostly.
Okay. So in the absence
I do have
of Daily
to open
Kos,
my story page to remember everything I've written about. I'm not good at it.
Yeah. Well,
remembering.
Once you've written it, it's like, forget it. Right? But let's see. Oh, I have one of them parked in Pocket, so I at least have that. It's something that I put aside. In particular, national democracy gets a reprieve.
Oh, wait. First, we have to do one thing.
Oh, okay. Update.
Kootenai County.
Kootenai, okay. I don't know what I was saying. Probably Kootenai?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kootenai. Kootenai, not I. All right. I might have had the stress on the wrong, so I can't remember anymore. But thank you. All right. I figured it was something like that. Whenever the further west you move, the different, just pronunciations become different.
Yes, they do.
Okay, Kootenai. I think I'm probably close in terms of the stress, but okay. Well, they should make an E on the end or something. Change it to EY, and it'll be easier. Well, anyway. Yeah, that was some story, too, and a great parallel to what's happening in Florida, and I think might as well mention that it should be parallel to any place where, and it's now everywhere, because Republicans locally have all decided, Ron DeSantis is having great success with this. Glenn Youngkin tells people he's having great success with this.
For some reason, he still seems to be able to convince people of that.
Yeah. Well, he can show up and, make claims about things. He's got the governor's entourage that can go with him. So, for instance, he decides to have a town hall, CNN covers it. I don't really know why, but they did.
They want to make Glenn Youngkin happen.
I guess so.
I don't understand why.
I don't know. They like fleece. That's the only thing I can think of. But, and by the way, he was, where was he? Carlisle Group, right? I wonder if they're buying fleece manufacturing concerns. They ought to be. All right. So, yes, one reminder of things that you've written about, right? The national democracy gets a reprieve from Supreme Court, but North Carolina is not so lucky. I don't know if that's still your latest. Probably not.
No, it's not my latest.
That's last week.
Interesting. And I'm not, I think it's likely that this is the Supreme Court punting on the ridiculous independent state legislature theory. I think that they found a way not to have to rule on it.
That's their
which is
favorite game.
Probably better for everybody by punting it back to the North Carolina Supreme Court. But this means that the North Carolina Supreme Court has done something extraordinarily awful by deciding it needed to rehear the cases that brought this to the Supreme Court because of an election.
Okay.
There had been a 4-3 Democratic majority on the state Supreme Court, the North Carolina Supreme Court, which said, no, the state legislature does not get to overrule us, basically, on things related to elections. And the gerrymandered map that you have created does not work. So here's the map we're using. It was the one by the North Carolina Supreme Court that was not gerrymandered. This is the map we're going to use for the elections. And then that's what the Republican legislature took to the Supreme Court, saying, no, under this independent state legislature theory, we have the ultimate say. We are the ultimate authority on all things federal elections. And the state Supreme Court can go pound sand. The governor can go pound sand. This is us.
Okay.
So that's what we had in the Supreme Court in December. That's what the case that they heard. And we had going into the hearing, at least 4 sort of supportive conservative justices of the idea that, the state legislatures get to decide everything.
Oh.
Thomas, Alito,
I see. Yes, okay.
Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh.
Right. They might be willing to stand with that.
And in the oral arguments, they definitely still had Alito. Thomas was quiet. Gorsuch was leaning a little toward the Republicans. Kavanaugh was clearly thinking, now that it's here in front of us, it's maybe a little too much.
Okay.
So out of the oral arguments, it seemed like they were not really so thrilled with doing this. Then the North Carolina Supreme Court changes hands with the election, and they say, okay, well, we're going to just take these cases back and hear them, and you're off the hook, Supreme Court. So what the U.S. Supreme Court has done is remand it back to the state.
Yeah.
And say, well, okay, since they're doing this over, we should at the very least get a new hearing and get new stuff. So we're kind of putting it on the back burner and letting you guys figure this out. And we'll see what we have to do with it later on.
All right. Yes.
What this means, though, is that the North Carolina Supreme Court is screwing over North Carolina.
Hey.
They refuse to take briefings from, or updated friend of the court briefs from either the Democratic governor of the state or the state attorney general.
Oh.
Hello?
Yeah, well, that's unusual. Oh, am I?
Kagro?
There you go. All right. How about now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know. Some button got pressed somewhere where I said, hey, all of a sudden I'm mute. Now, what button was that? I don't know.
I don't know. I hope I wasn't mute as well.
No, you were not. You were loud and clear and explaining everything to everyone. It's just
so here we are.
Yeah. And I just me saying, I agree. Wait, hello? Okay. Yeah, well, this, I guess is, well, it's certainly worrisome that, it's back in different hands. I mean, I guess I wasn't initially, my first thought was, well, remanding it to North Carolina, which, might not be such a bad idea, but then, of course, the composition of their court changed. So, yes. All right. So now they have the opportunity, if they want to take it, to try and reason something out for themselves as Republicans. And I guess it'll be a question of whether it's too aggressive and therefore somehow offensive maybe to Brett Kavanaugh later on.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And just to add that this is really sort of an extraordinary measure taken by the state Supreme Court, because they are not really alleging that there was any massive flaw that the previous court conducted. There really isn't a good reason for doing this.
I see. The flaw is that they weren't us.
Just raw partisan power.
Yeah, some other people handled this, and I don't like that. That's the flaw.
Yes.
So we'll do it over. All right. Well, that's very Republican of them, at any rate. And,
very Republican of them. Bad because it's North Carolina.
Yeah.
North Carolina is kind of important for democracy going forward.
Right.
For not letting Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump be president again for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, and North Carolina has kind of been in the middle of these things for some time now, since the their redistricting guru, right? Like, well, I was going to say was caught red-handed, but basically, had himself arrested red-handed. He documented for everybody who cared to see it that his gerrymandering efforts were, in fact, designed to dilute the voting power of African Americans. It's on purpose. Yep. I did it. This is the reason I did what I did. And still, they can't seem to know these guys. Yeah. So, long history there, but they're walking a tightrope in North Carolina, and occasionally manage to salvage things from time to time. So, it's not a state you want to give up on. They can occasionally muster.
Well, they do have a Democratic governor and a Democratic AG.
Right. So they can occasionally muster the organizing it takes to wrest power away. And between the North Carolinians and the Georgians, they are demonstrating some real accomplishments in a state that could go the other way very easily. So we'll lend our best support, I suppose, and then hold our breath and see what they do with this court case.
For the sake of everybody else, yes, this is a good outcome on the Supreme Court side, the U.S. Supreme Court side so far. It's probably enough to give Kavanaugh and definitely Amy Coney Barrett pause to say, we don't need to go this far yet. That's my thinking.
Yeah.
But if they can get out of having to make a ridiculous, to have put on paper Samuel Alito saying, yes, state legislatures get to have total say.
Yeah.
They would probably like to be able to avoid that, particularly after, his decision in the abortion case, invoking 17th century witch finders. And
yeah, I guess you want to avoid it as much as you can. It's interesting to find out, where their limits are, and the idea that all of a sudden even Brett Kavanaugh's and Amy Coney Barrett's and the like have some, I guess, measure of, I don't know if it's shame or not necessarily, but just
awareness of their place on the stage of history.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And, it's interesting. I mean, for a while, it seemed like Roberts was the only one who had it. And it wasn't even it wasn't even a very strong sense of it necessarily. Or at least he wasn't able to exercise it all that strongly. But it was clear that he had that nagging feeling of having responsibility for a country on his hands after all.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure the others would have
coming up with conservative results.
Yeah, no doubt.
But not whack job conservative results.
Yeah.
Except in the case of voting rights and voter suppression.
Well, yeah, I guess every once in a while there's a little something that
see,
they just
there he would point to, look, black people are voting. Look, they're voting for black people. Look, there's progress. We can say that we did this, that the voting rights did its job. He was lying, but he did have justification.
I guess so. I mean, there were things happening, and the correct conclusion, of course, in our view was, well, there are certain mechanisms that are making that possible. So as long as we leave those mechanisms in place, it will continue to be possible. But he thought, job's done now. Turn all the machines off. Everything's fine.
Whereas, it's pretty clear from Thomas and Alito that they just, they don't care.
Right.
They just want to blow it all up.
I guess that's it. And I guess, I don't know, maybe Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett maybe felt like, we put so much effort into getting through law school and we did so well. And we're good at this stuff. And it's embarrassing that it can all be flushed down the toilet and this is now a job anybody can do just by wish casting. I don't know. Maybe that bothered them.
It might have.
Guess so.
And Gorsuch too. Every now and then Gorsuch comes out sounding reasonable.
Yeah. You'd think he'd be more consistent on that, maybe. I mean, he also.
One would hope.
But all right. Well, we'll take what we can get, I suppose. Which now we have to wait and see.
Well, until we can
our
reform the
range
Supreme
of
Court,
choices
we
are.
can until we can convince enough Democrats in the
Yes.
White House and in the Senate that this is kind of bullshit.
I guess so.
And you need to do something about the court. Until then, we take what we can get.
Yeah, I mean, really, I guess I say that like we'll take what we can get, but only because, so far we haven't convinced other people. You can get more. You can do better. You can change the way things are happening, as opposed to just saying, "Well, what can you do?" Now they've decided legislatures are in
maybe
charge.
we just start in Texas.
Oh,
yeah, with the district and circuit courts.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Fifth,
Right?
that it incorporates Texas, but particularly the district courts.
Yeah, where they
where
gerrymandered the courts.
They've gerrymandered essentially the district courts, so that there are two Trump appointee, reliable, nut job district court judges in two jurisdictions, and where they are the only judges in those jurisdictions. So groups like the, what do they call, Alliance for Hippocratic something or other, the people who want to ban the abortion pill.
Yeah.
They incorporate in Amarillo, Texas, so they know that they can go to 45-year-old Matthew Kaczmarek.
Yeah.
And he will advance their cause. They know that they can then go up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and get one of, 3, 5 Trump and Bush appointees who are just as whack job, and they will advance it to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so any stupid lawsuit, that would ordinarily stand, pretty much anywhere else, 50-50 or better chance of just being dismissed at the district court level as, that's just not stating a claim that the federal courts have any jurisdiction over.
Right.
Now has a glide path all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Nothing stands between them.
This is happening right now in Texas with Judge Kaczmarek, who is taking a page, trying to anyway, from the Supreme Court and deciding things in the shadow docket. He doesn't have recourse to the shadow docket.
Yeah.
But he's trying to use that. Let's not have any transparency in what we're doing. Scheduling the first hearings for the request that he intervene and do the FDA's job and say the FDA has to pull approval for this drug. He wanted to have that in private. He wanted to have the hearing for that secret. So,
wow. Yeah.
It didn't work, obviously, because some of the lawyers on the phone call that they had on Friday, when he called them and said, okay, we're going to do this secretly. I'm not going to put it on the public docket, as we do with every single case coming before this district court. I'm not putting it on the docket until the very last minute, the night before we have the hearing, because I don't want people to know we're doing it.
Oh, is that all?
Luckily, some of the lawyers on the phone call said, that's kind of bullshit. And went to the Washington Post and said, hey, guess what he's doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so now we all know that
they're
the
not
hearing's
prohibited
on Wednesday.
from doing that. Okay. Well, I mean, it's not enough that they've rigged the process from start to finish. They now need to do it in secret. I guess, I guess that was probably the rule, was as long as it's noticed in advance, but maybe we need to have rules about how far in advance. Do they not have those rules?
It's all very highly, highly irregular.
Yes,
the phone call that he had on Friday was sealed. There was just a notice on the docket for this case that there was something that happened on Friday that was sealed.
And I guess
so that, gave the first indication to people who were watching this case very closely that there was something weird going on. Then we found out that it was his attempt to keep the hearing secret. He couldn't. He's not the Supreme Court. He doesn't have the shadow docket. He can't do these things secretly. But he was going to do his darndest to try by waiting until the very last possible minute to put it on the public docket.
Well, it's odd and I guess a bit of hardball that I guess he must have figured out he was entitled to.
And we should also say that this is not a case that should be it should have been dismissed. In most other jurisdictions, it would have been dismissed, which is why, of course, they went to Amarillo, Texas, because it's a bunch of doctors who say they've treated people with misoprostone. Sorry, I had a hard time pronouncing that.
I always do.
The abortion pill. And while they can't point to actual deaths, they can say, or even bad outcomes, they can say there's always the possibility for bad outcomes. And that the FDA should withdraw its approval, which they gave 20 years ago, and it has been proven safe and effective, and lots and lots and lots of women have used it, and it's not killed anybody. And anyway, we have standing to bring this because there's always the possibility that there's going to be a problem.
Somebody could get fentanyl in it.
Problem number one, they really don't have a case.
Yeah.
Problem number two, it's the FDA's job to approve drugs. It is not a judge's job to tell the FDA to disapprove a drug.
That would be like legislating from the bench or something.
It kind of would,
can't have
wouldn't
that.
it?
Yeah, that's crazy. But this is...
again, this is a case that should not be being heard at all, let alone secretly.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a problem. The secrecy all by itself is unusual, and but this demonstrates the power of what they've set up for themselves. Is ordinarily, there any case anywhere, I guess, is subject to abuse by the parties in the case, in the way they make their pleadings, by judges who may be biased to it, but the design of the federal judiciary here is, even if you get one lunatic judge who has a reputation for being a lunatic and people forum shop to get in front of that judge, there's always, you can always appeal, because if they do something crazy, you go on appeal and the appeals court will immediately recognize the crazy. But what do you do if you've built yourself an appeals court around these crazy judges, who sit between them and the Supreme Court, who are also willing to say, oh yeah, the crazy thing, we love crazy things. And it makes it all the way to the Supreme Court. Stuff that should be dismissed at the lowest possible level is instead being considered on its merits in the Supreme Court all of a sudden because of what they've engineered. And it's insane.
It's how every challenge to Obamacare made it to the Supreme Court.
And right. So it's not like it's a rarity anymore. It's now a clear practice and pattern, and they have we're reading articles about how it was intentional. Absolutely, we do this stuff all the time, and one guy handles nothing but abortion cases, and one guy handles nothing but voting cases, and one guy handles nothing but attacking
immigration.
Immigration and healthcare cases, and you just start feeding this garbage one after the other with no filter whatsoever, because the Fifth Circuit is full of people that it's very easy to draw 2 out of 3 of your judges who will just say, oh, I don't understand it, makes no sense, doesn't matter to me. Go ahead. We will uphold the crazy secret holdings of the judge who hates legislating from the bench, but just legislated from the bench and did it in secret because he loves openness so much. And boom, now it's a Supreme Court case instead of garbage, which is where it usually ends up when you have a functioning judiciary. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's the place that you could convince Democrats to say, well, I don't know, if it scares you to start with Supreme Court level reforms, start with the district courts. You have that power, and it happens all the time, and then maybe you find out court reform isn't so scary after all. Or maybe it's just, maybe if you never want to have that Supreme Court reform, the perhaps the best you think you can do is to say, all right, even if we can't change if you feel like you can't change the size of the Supreme Court, at least cut off this stupid pipeline of idiocy that's rendering the Supreme Court a joke. I mean, why not just have Judge Judy at this point? Like, the television crap.
at the moment, we still have Dick Durbin saying he really, really, really wants to keep blue slips for district court judges. So,
yeah,
I don't know how much progress we're going to have in pushing for this reform. But
it is pretty crazy. And, man, I mean, interesting, too, that you would still be stuck on blue slips for a number of reasons, but that you're bound by this tradition. Like, does it not occur to him that as he's trying to stick to the blue slip thing, you have judges in Texas having secret dockets, right, keeping their dockets confidential. And I mean, he must have noticed, obviously someone told him about this crazy pipeline, but
I sure hope so. I mean, other Democrats are talking about it. Ron Wyden had a very long floor speech about it, which was quite good, by the way.
Okay.
Saying, here's what the FDA needs to do when this crazy judge in Texas does this thing. Ignore him.
Yeah.
Force the Supreme Court to rule on it.
Yeah, I guess so.
But
it's a little risky.
So it's not like it's a secret among Senate Democrats that this is what's happening.
Yeah.
In Amarillo, Texas. And in the Fifth Circuit.
Sometimes you wonder what reaches their ears. Every once in a while you find out that things that people are talking about rather broadly are allegedly brand new to. I never heard of such a thing.
Yes.
And sometimes it's really true.
I find that frequently because, they don't have time to spend their entire day on Twitter seeing what everybody's reporting and looking at, they get what they're briefed about. And maybe we need to do a better job at getting to staff.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's us. Yeah. This is my fault. I'm sure of it somehow. I feel guilty as it is. Well, this is an approach that I guess we ought to be exploring, and you never know. And occasionally, the people who are supposed to be on top of these things are on top of some other aspect of something else that is also bad. Although sometimes they're just advocating for blue slips. I'm kind of stuck on the Supreme Court as pretty much the most important thing right now that we need to be thinking about fixing. There's a lot. Well, so, debt ceiling, that would be a good thing too. Yes, true also.
And really, really Biden's just going to need to bite the bullet and say, all right, I'm doing this without you.
I guess so. And it feels like he's maybe warming up for things like that. I just, catching the morning news about his executive orders on guns and, clearly getting into the mode of, it looks like I'm just going to have to do a lot of this without Congress. Though I thought I could sway them, and I ran on the possibility of reaching across the aisle 2 years, 3 years in, maybe not. Okay.
No.
Well, I have a feeling we'll still be talking. We'll still have time for debt ceiling antics next week.
And probably government shutdown because,
Yeah, well, Tuesday.
We're going to be operating under continuing resolutions for the next 2 years.
Okay. Well, that's going to come up every
down now.
Once in a while then. So, that's like as we always say, if it's Tuesday, there's a government shutdown to talk about.
Right.
So, all right. We'll save it for next time. Then we've got to divert to other also, hot button issues.
I'm on vacation next week.
Well, we won't.
Make it 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, good. That means you can all, the government and the economic system will probably last 2 weeks at a minimum.
Well, the house is out until then. So
yeah. So a good time will be had by all. It's a good time to do this. They won't wreck anything while they're on vacation, probably, because then their credit cards would get rejected wherever they were. And that would be a big problem. Any more bank failures? We'll see. Thanks, Joan. And good luck fixing Daily Kos single-handedly. I hope you can do it.
I will do my best. I know you're relying on me.
Very good. I'll send you a hammer if that's of any help. Check in with you 2 weeks from now. Thanks again.
All right.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning.
You have.
With David Waldman.
And, of course, with Joan McCarter. And now I'll have 2 BS instances to think about bleeping, even though it's perfectly fine to be able to say these things on podcasts and I don't know who I'm offending. But if you want to stick around and listen to Justice Putnam, maybe he'll curse his head off. Who knows what's coming next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. Stay tuned.